I'll be trying to talk about philosophical orientation in Indian sociology. What does this philosophical orientation in sociology means? As I have told you that we are discussing about sociology of Indian sociology, there are certain cognitive tension exist in Indian sociology. What are these cognitive tension is? Why should we say it's a cognitive tension? Cognitive tension in the sense that at cognitive level, these dichotomies exist and occurs. For example, we try to be modern in our practices. At times also, we are trying to be traditional or ethnic. Don't you think that this kind of dichotomy exists in your day-to-day life? I think that is linked with some kind of cognitive tensions, which is correct. Whether I should, for example, you all are the product of modern epoch, isn't it? You try to wear jeans and t-shirt, isn't it? But if I'll ask you a categorical questions that do you believe in caste? Would you like to marry somebody beyond your caste? I think there you will become traditional, isn't it? So I think this is called a dichotomy exists, and this dichotomy is at cognitive level, at individual level, but at societal level also these dichotomies or these cognitive tensions exist. And therefore what Yogendra Singh is trying to argue that these cognitive tensions has given a framework to sociology and the theory building which is fluctuating in nature. It's not that a particular system is given or a particular theoretical framework is given and you have to go by that. No. So theory building process in India was fluctuating. And moreover, I have talked about the periodization of Indian sociology. While talking about periodization of Indian sociology, specifically from 1952 to 77. But this 1952 to 77 periodization of Indian sociology has been further classified by Yogendra Singh in 4 phases. That is, the broad phase is 1952 to 77. During this particular period, there were ideological tussles, there is ideological conflict, there was cognitive tensions, exist in the process of knowledge formation in India. And these knowledge formations are subjected to 2 aspects. One is the historicity, historical context. The third is about the current happenings and current developments in society. So these 2 factors all the time contributed to the formation of knowledge, and it created a kind of knowledge formation was there, but it was in a state of not a very clear cut ideological and theoretical formulations, but these are the ideological and cognitive tension exist during 1952 to 77. If you look at this particular period 52 to 77, the force of history and existential coordinates of knowledge were there. What does it mean? The forces of history and the history's forces were coordinating with the knowledge formulations. So normal knowledge formulations were coordinated with the process and forces of history. What does it mean? Whatever the development which were taking place across the globe during that time, it has an impact. For example, you can talk about Second World War. Second World War has impacted knowledge formation. Of course, the point I'm trying to argue, the formation of other global developments has in one way or other impacted. Therefore, we say the forces of history contributes or continuously affects and focuses on the development of knowledge. So knowledge formation was subjected to the forces of history, and as well as the developments and tensions or the developmental activities or the contemporary developmental issues were affecting the knowledge formations. If you take this framework to go further, what you can see, he says that To understand this 52 to 77 framework of Indian sociology, you can make it or you can develop four short periods, and these four short periods has to be understood. So therefore, it is 52 to 77, maybe 27 years or maybe 25 years. But he is now saying, first look at what kind of theoretical formulation were there in India during 1952 to 1960. So 1952 to 1960, this is first period where these theoretical aspects of Indian society has emerged. So 52 to 60, this is first period. And what was theoretical aspects involved in this particular period? It says during this particular period, means 1952 to 60, that is 8 years, you can see there is adaptive changes and innovations in Indian knowledge formations. Adaptive changes and innovations, these are the two terms he used. Adaptive changes and innovations which you can see during this particular period 1952 to 60. What are the adaptive changes? Adaptive changes means we tries to adapt to the circumstances. If you take the Archinian framework, adaptation to change, adaptation to legislations, adaptation to become a modern society. I think that is all adaptation. India, when after 1952, when we adopted our constitutions, so it was a kind of adaptation to newness, adaptation to be a modern society, adaptation to have a society based on the principle of equity, equality, liberty and fraternity. I think these are the adaptive. Of course, you can see the contradictions. In the one hand, if you talk about Dr. Ambedkar, who has said in 1952 when we adopted Indian constitutions, he said at political level we have democracy. So at societal and economic level we are not having democracy. Unless until societally and economically we become democratic, this political democracy will not survive. And we may lose our political democracy. So the point what he is trying to argue in that, so this is the adaptiveness. That means we adopted Indian constitution where the core values were equality, liberty and fraternity, and having one man, one vote, one value. But in societal level, we should respect each other. Isn't it? In schools, of course you all have studied from schools, there is a very slogan which used to be there: India is my country, all the people are my brothers and sisters. What does it mean? You recited this line several times, but do you consider all Indian as your brother and sisters in true sense? That true sense is supposed to exist. Still, I think we are struggling to consider all the citizens of this country as our brother and sisters. So this is dichotomy. In schools, we announce it like this: India is my country, I love my country, and all the people in India are my brothers and sisters. So the point here is adaptiveness. Actually, we are still, I think, in the process of adaptiveness to this philosophy. So adaptiveness and innovations, which were the core words during 1952 to 1960 and this particular period, wherein many adaptive changes were taken place. I have given the narration, what were the adaptive changes and what are the innovations. Innovation in terms of industrializations, in terms of taking India to be a industrialized country, and all that was the effort initially during 1952 to 60, all plannings, I think first 5-year plan, second 5-year plan, you can see these plans during that particular period. I think all these periods talks about innovations. Innovations is taking India from an agrarian society to an industrial society. So I think this, the first phase, 1952 to 1960. Adoptions and innovation were the two terms which were formulating or which were helping Indian thinkers and social scientists particularly sociologists, to talk about change and then take India to greater heights. So I think that was the period 1952 to 60. If you then talk about the other categorization, what Yogendra Singh is trying to argue is 1960 to 1965. What happened during this 1960 to 1965? During 1960 to 65 and the second periodization of Indian sociology, where we significantly prioritize our theoretical formulations and created a kind of critical tensions in theory and ideology of Indian sociology. What does it mean? I'm talking about the period called 1960 to 1965. These 5 years. What happened during these 5 years? You can find it out by referring to the developmental policies during this particular period called 1960 to 65. So there is a significant shift from theoretical priorities to some critical tension theory and ideology. You can try to look at this. I'm talking about the period from 1960 to 65. During that particular 5 years, there are certain tensions in Indian society. Tension in that sense, during this particular period, 60 to 65, it was not clear whether we tries to be a capitalist society or whether we tries to adopt socialism or we tries to be a mixed economy. So this kind of tension was there during 1960 to 65. What kind of development, what kind of economy, what kind of society, what kind of industrializations, what kind of economic practices in terms of ideology specifically, whether we should go by market economy or we'll go by capitalist kind of economy or we'll go by mixed economy or we'll go for private and public sectors. I think all these issues were there predominantly during 1960 to 65. So therefore, what Yogendra Singh writes that some critical tensions in theory and ideology of Indian sociology. What kind of theory, what kind of ideological practices we should follow. This is the period from 1960 to 65. Thirdly, 1965 to 1970. This is another 5 years. And this another 5 years, you can see there are certain new directions in terms of theoretical and substantive contributions. So this period is 1965 to 70. Look at what happened during 1965 to 70 during these 5 years. I think some kind of innovation, some kind of newness, some kind of new directions were practiced, and during these new directions and theoretical and substantive contributions had emerged, and that is the period from 1965 to 70. So in terms of contextualizing these arguments, in 1965 to 1970, Yogendra Singh writes certain new directions in theory and some kind of substantive contributions taken place during this particular period. You know, new direction in a sense that during this particular period, 65 to 70, I think focus was much on planning, focus was much more on policies, focus was much more on to bring transformations, specifically transformation in rural societies. I think all these things were the priority during 1965 to 70 in terms of priorities in policies and bringing transformation in rural society. I think that is called a new beginning, new directions, because in 1952 onwards, plan period has started. It was taken a momentum during 1965 to 70. Of course, I think if you remember, I don't know exactly, but the period is like this, Garibi Hatao. I think this was a political slogan during that particular period, where it was much more focused at how to alleviate poverty in India. A new beginning in terms of many things, specifically in the context of policies, formulation of policies and plans, and bring transformation to rural society. So this is the period called 65 to 70. Finally, the last stage, what he's trying to say, 1970 to 1977. I think he's trying to give a fourfold periodization of Indian sociology. I think the last period what Yogendra Singh is trying to talk about, it is the period called 1970 to 77. And what happened during this particular period, 1970 to 77? He says that Indian sociology, Indian writings have moved further and to attain some kind of new maturity in terms of theory and in terms of development of the horizon of knowledge. We are talking about the period called 1970 to 77. What happened during this particular period? So Indian society, Indian sociology moved towards a new maturity and explored both theoretically and substantively new horizon of knowledge. You know, when you say that the period 1970 to 77, a sense of matured way to build theory was initiated during this particular period called 70 to 77. You know, if you refer to the studies which were undertaken by Indian sociologists during this particular period from 1970 to 77, if you look at these studies, what are the studies were undertaken in this particular period called 70 to 7, there you can locate how Indian sociologists try to mature in their writings or in terms of formulation of their policies. So I think to look at this, you must look at the writings of Indian sociologists, those who wrote specifically caste, class, and power. And there are many studies you can find out during 1970 to 77. I think that suggests that knowledge formulation in India is getting mature in terms of substantiveness, in terms of new concept, in terms of new formulations. I think so. These are suggesting a kind of new maturity among Indian sociologists. I think these are the fourfold periodization of Indian society or Indian sociology, which starts from 1952 to 1977. Despite all these innovations, theoretical formulations, and knowledge formulations, it was not clear or it was difficult to identify the predominant theoretical model and ideological system. Clear. So it was not clear during this particular phase called 1952 to 1977 what kind of theoretical formulations Indian sociologists are exploring or writings. So, therefore, what Yogendra Singh is trying to argue that you can say some kind of theoretical constructions or some kind of theoretical zigzags, you can say, and some kind of theoretical formulations were there, but not in a very clear-cut manner. In which directions ideological formulations are taking place, in which directions the theoretical formulations are heading towards. So why? Because he is trying to argue that Indian sociologists throughout this period have been less concerned with constructing master theories or general theories, but more prone to using conceptual schemes for analysis of social problem. What I am trying to argue? I am just trying to argue that during this particular period of 1952 to 77, there were theoretical contributions, but it was not clear in which directions the theoretical contributions are heading. So therefore, what he said, neither our sociologists were in a position to create master theory or general theory, but they are more prone to using conceptual schemes and conceptual scheme based analysis of social problem.